Gators Breakdown episode 117 is ready to go. Rivalry week, Florida versus Florida State. And of course, we'll talk the coaching search. More Chip Kelly news is out there. Episode 117. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SCC. My co-host, Will Miles, will join us later whenever he gets a chance to jump in here. But joining us tonight to preview the Florida State game from the FSU side is Josh Newberg from Knowles 24/7 and the Big Three roll-up. Josh, man, I can't thank you enough for joining me here on Gators Breakdown and talking Knowles Gators and just whatever else I guess comes up for the about 30 minutes we have you.
Yeah, man, we got a big cush in the air tonight. Big cush. Getting ready to record the Big Three roll up here in about a half hour or two as soon as I get off. So looking forward to that. But yeah, man, great to be here. Appreciate you.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too. Some of our audience bleeds over from the Gator side, and your guys' Big Three roll up. It's kind of the podcasting world in the state of Florida is kind of taken off.
I think it's a great thing. I think the more quality podcasts we can get out there, the better. I think for all of us, I think we can all be successful. We put out these pods, whatever we do, a couple hours a week. I mean, there's plenty of hours for us all to get listened to. And the thing that I think, the more people just listening to podcasts in general, the better we're all going to do. So I appreciate you guys doing a great podcast.
Yeah, you guys too. A little different. We're more I won't say newsy, but I guess more fact-driven, and you guys over there have some culture and some football to go along with.
It's a lifestyle show, baby. It's a lifestyle show.
Taking over the life of its own, man. Talk about your work at Knowles 24/7, what you got going on there with all the talk of the season coming to an end and all the Jimbo talk.
Yeah, man. Just covering the news, and the news of the day is Jimbo to Texas A&M, the potential of Jimbo to Texas A&M. So I wrote about that actually for the first time. It was more of a table setter article today, just identifying the teams that are pursuing him, which would be Texas A&M, Tennessee, and potentially Auburn if Gus were to leave. I think those are the three teams to watch for Jimbo. Don't necessarily think he's out the door just yet, but I'm one of these people where, you got to figure Texas A&M is trying to make a great hire because they got a new AD. So they're going to make a splash. I'm not going to sit here and deny the fact that they're going to go after Jimbo. We know they're going to go after Jimbo. Is Jimbo going to take the bait and go? That's another question. So I woke up this morning and I was like, you know what? Someone's going to be fired. This thing's going to get hot and heavy. It's time to introduce this to the FSU fan base. And I think it's something that they should pay attention to.
And Josh, it seems like they've had to pay attention to it for 3, 4, 5 seasons in a row. The last few seasons, Jimbo and the coaching talk. Of course, LSU, Texas, all those schools coming up. Why is it that Jimbo's name gets thrown into these coaching searches a lot?
A lot of it is winning. A lot of it has to do with winning and his success that he's had at Florida State, and the fact that he came in and took a program that was struggling for almost a decade, and within 4 seasons, they won a national championship. He recruited really well, top 5 classes annually. And when you're in search of a head coach, he checks a lot of the boxes. And also he's at Florida State. While Florida State is a power player in college football, there's a few teams out there that can outpay Florida State. You don't see this with Urban Meyer. You don't really, you don't see it with Jim Harbaugh unless you're talking the NFL. You don't see it with Nick Saban quite as often. But with Jimbo, I think the success mixed with the value, meaning he's financially attainable. You can compete with Florida State when it comes to dollars. I think all that just kind of mixes together at every offseason. It's, and the funny thing is every offseason too, he does get hired. Like there's an outlet, and I don't just mean blog sites. Like there's an outlet every year that has Jimbo Fisher is now the next head coach at LSU, Texas, Auburn, whatever. So yeah, we deal with it, man. And my take is I don't want to stick my head in the sand.
Yeah.
I want to report on it. I don't necessarily want to, I'm not lying to people at all. I just want to report on it, what's happening. And that's kind of where we're at right now with the Texas A&M rumors.
Well, it's funny, when you report on stuff, people think that's your opinion as well. So
yeah, I get it, man.
Oh yeah. We can look at also the Florida coaching situation from the FSU side of things as well. What do you make of everything that's going on? Of course, Chip Kelly's the hot name going out there, and there are various reports coming out there that now, of course, UCLA's in the running, and he may be closer to getting with UCLA instead of Florida.
I was at dinner just now. Like, this is funny because I always troll with Silk in the DMs. Like, I'll be like, yo, I just woke up from a nap. Did I miss the announcement? You know, like every like twice a day, I'm telling Silk, like, I was just right, what I missed. But I was literally at dinner, and coming home, I kind of took a scroll through Twitter. But it looks like there's reports swinging the other way now, like UCLA is, or where are we at? Just give me a quick refresher. What did I miss over the last 2 hours?
Yeah, the 24/7 UCLA site, Bruins Online or Bruins Report, something like that. I don't know the official name of it, but put out a story, and now it's been retracted.
That's what I saw. They deleted it.
Yeah,
like, I haven't even had a chance to go to the message boards and like read. I was just on Twitter. I'm like, what? And I knew we were going to talk about this. So yeah, I appreciate the refresher. So
yeah, so then apparently they were saying
put out a story and then retracted it.
Yeah, and the story said that there are coaches, there's different agents and different coaches around the nation that have told UCLA sources that Chip Kelly is telling them UCLA would be his choice, and he's trying to get coaches to go with him.
I love it.
So, one question I'll speak from the Florida coaching situation. What, as a Noles fan, like, who would be the coach Noles fans would not want to see on the Florida sideline?
Willie Taggart.
And we know recruiting probably reason one for that, and his reputation. We see what he's doing at Oregon there, and we saw the product he put on the field at South Florida as well.
Yeah, but you got to remember, he took over a 2-win team at South Florida.
Yeah.
It was void of talent. Not only is it recruiting, but it was building a program. I mean, what Skip Holtz did there, and just real brief, like when Skip Holtz got hired, they had a lot of APR issues. The admin at USF made him recruit high academic kids. Well, when you're at USF, you're not getting high academic plus high ability. Like, that's just not going to happen at USF. That's out of their realm. So they got a bunch of guys that couldn't play football, and their APR went up. Then they brought in Willie Taggart, and he had to do a complete facelift of that program. So while I'll say he is a great recruiter, I mean, he really rebuilt that program at USF. And you're seeing Charlie Strong, as much as they try to destroy that offense, I mean, they're still 10-1 or whatever, 9-1. So Willie is – I was talking to a coach 2 nights ago, and I just said, I think if FSU were to open, I think it would be a Willie Taggart job. And this coach is an out-of-state coach. He just started laughing, and I go, what? He goes, man, these coaches, they don't want to see Willie in the streets. They don't want to see Willie in the streets with and he meant like Florida State, but he said with a Florida shirt on. And I said, yeah, he'd be pretty dangerous. He goes, they know what he did at USF, and they see what he's doing out at Oregon, getting all these Florida kids to come. I mean, if he was in Gainesville or Tallahassee, he'd clean up. So I think Willie Taggart, to me, and maybe I'm speaking biasly because I worked so closely with Willie for 3 or 4 years, and I know him well. I don't, like, Chip's a great hire. I would consider Chip a great hire still. But if you're going to ask me, like, who Florida State fans would probably fear the most, I think Willie Taggart coming in would probably be the most feared guy.
Gotcha. So, Josh, let's dive into this Florida State game this coming up weekend. It can't be just coaching talk, even though there's still one game left to be played, at least for Florida anyway. But, guys out there, remember, you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Just search on those sites. So get the links by following Gators Breakdown on Twitter and on Facebook at Gators Breakdown. Hey, when you're on iTunes, please rate and review the show. So, Josh, here we are, 2, 4, and 6 teams that had high aspirations after big games to open up the season. Where fans were really excited the season got going, and didn't spend nothing but disappointment since. It's sad to see Florida State game not really mean anything nationally, and all the talk features around the coaches or lack thereof, or what the future holds for coaches. Does it seem weird that this game is not nationally relevant for 1 year?
Yeah, it seems really weird. I mean, really weird. This is. And I was hoping, I was listening to the coaches' press conferences on Monday, and I was hoping one of them would, take one for the team and just say some outlandish stuff and really get this thing cranking. But Jimbo Fisher sat there and like complimented Randy Shannon, and Shannon did the same. And I was just like, you guys, are you guys really trying to sell tickets to this thing? Which they're not. But yeah, man, this is one of the most lackluster Florida State games that I can remember in my lifetime.
Yeah. Because, usually you've had Florida being down, but Florida State be good, or you've had Florida be good and Florida State be down, but never, or like this in recent years.
I can't remember it being this bad in my lifetime, like where you had two sub 500 teams facing off. I can't recall.
Absolutely. So, Josh, I want to get to an article you wrote and kind of tied it to Florida just a little bit too. You said the culture needs to change. Many felt that way about Florida, and you wrote this week that it's also an issue at Florida State. So, in going by that, was it more than just the DeAndre Francois injury that derailed Florida State season?
Oh, yeah. It's never one thing. I think it's a lot of little things that went into it. My article was addressing the fact that DeAndre Francois wasn't at the Delaware State game and went home and was, on social media during it. And I kind of used that opportunity to talk about the issue with Florida State, which is the void of leadership on this team in 2017. And I think the decision of Francois to go home is only part of the culture issue. To me, it was more troubling that he had the confidence and, he thought it was acceptable to walk into Jimbo Fisher's office and even ask to go home on senior day on a home game when, he's been on the sidelines and he's traveled with the team. And to me, it reflected on Jimbo Fisher as well, because I assume, now this is an assumption, that Jimbo Fisher okayed DeAndre Francois' absence, that he was going to go home. And I assume that because if Jimbo Fisher did not approve DeAndre Francois' absence, then that's an even bigger problem with the program, because at this point, DeAndre Francois, if he went home and didn't inform Jimbo Fisher, he should be kicked off the team, or at least suspended for the rest of the season, something like that. So I'm just going to assume that Jimbo Fisher accepted DeAndre Francois' absence. The issue that I have with that is the program has no leadership. If DeAndre Francois is not a born leader, isn't it Jimbo Fisher's job to mold him into one? Because you look at the issue this year with the lack of leadership, and Derwin James is on the roster and DeAndre Francois, those are your two leaders. Well, James is going to leave. So if the biggest issue this year is no leadership, where's the leadership next year? So that article kind of like, yes, this is the issue this year, but with what happened over the weekend, are we going to look at another team void of leadership next year? Because who is the leader? So yeah, I use that to illustrate that I think that there's deeper cultural issues going on at Florida State.
Yeah, that was kind of leadership is also a problem at Florida, and that's been kind of discussed too.
Right.
Well, some of the failures for this team as well. Will Miles joins us. Good.
When you don't have a head coach, you're kind of a rudderless ship. So I can see where I think the Gator situation is different than Florida State's situation.
Yeah.
It's just two different programs, but I understand what you're saying. And a lack of leadership, it happens in losing seasons too, though. That's also a symptom of the problem, losing.
Yeah, absolutely. Will Miles from SEC Country finally gets in here with us on Gators Breakdown. Will, we just started talking about the game itself between Florida and Florida State, so you can jump right in with Josh.
All right, thanks. So, you talked a little bit about Francois. Obviously, he's not the only problem, but what's happened to the FSU offensive line? It seems like they've really struggled, particularly on the road. Is it one thing you can pinpoint, or does it sort of go back to the culture question you were answering before?
No, the issue with Florida State's offensive line is really just Florida State's offensive line. I don't know if you've been watching it for the last 6 or 7 years, but this is pretty much what you get, unless you got a couple NFL draft picks like they did in 2013. But Florida State's offensive line has been god-awful for years. It's been up and down. I think this offensive line overall is better than last year. Last year, we would see complete meltdowns, like it would be 3rd and 2, and then all of a sudden they get back-to-back false starts, from the same player. It would be things like that. It was really ugly last year. It's just a bit ugly this year. they're not very good up front. I think it's a scheme thing. I think it's coaching. They haven't ever seemed to find the right combination. Their offensive line always seems like a work in progress. I think that has to do with it, continuity. They just got a lot of problems up front, man. And this year, of all the years, I mean, this is actually probably above average for what they usually trot out there on the O-line.
Josh, the Florida run defense has been pretty bad since the Georgia game against legit competition. How much will Cam Akers and the other FSU running backs be in the game plan?
And I'll tell you what, the only thing that's going to stop Cam Akers in this football game is Jimbo Fisher's play calling.
and that's been a problem with the running backs.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if they give the ball to Cam Akers 25 or 30 times, I think he's pushing 150 yards. But if you told me he touched it 14 times, I'd be like, yeah, it's probably – the way it went. Like, whenever we think that they're going to go do something, and it usually goes the other way. So I agree with you. I think Florida State could run all over them. Not to say every play is going to be a run, but I think if you commit to the run against the Gators in this game and you really give the ball to Cam 25 to 30 times a game, I truly believe he could run for well over 100 yards on this defense.
Yeah, so switching over to the defensive side of the ball, there are so many high-level recruits on that defense. I think coming into this year, it was the average star rating of the defensive starters was 4.3. But the defense has been sort of mediocre. Not bad, but just sort of mediocre. Again, is that a scheme thing? What do you attribute the struggles on defense? Because Florida State's traditionally pretty good on defense.
Yeah, to me, I don't see a disciplined defense. I think the issues that I see on defense is they don't play discipline, which means you don't focus on doing your job. I think they focus on doing every job all at once. And when you do that, you get out of position, you shade a little over here, you shade there, you get beat deep, and you don't end up in position to create turnovers. The thing when I watch Miami's defense, not only do they play fast and physical, but they play very disciplined. And when they seem opportunistic, but it's not really opportunities. They're just playing within their scheme. And I don't think Florida State has done that this year. I think you got too many guys worried about what's going on the other side of the field, or, who knows. But I just don't see a very disciplined team.
Josh, I'll leave you with this so you can get to record with the Big Three roll-up. Is Jimbo Fisher the coach next year at FSU?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to answer if that's too.
No. Everybody knows. My answers change with my mood. So right now, I just drank a bottle of wine at dinner. Right now, I'm going to say that I do think Fisher returns next year. I'm not opposed to covering a coaching search. I love to cover coaching searches. So if it were to happen, hey, we'll cover it. Knowles 24/7 will be all over it. So right now, just my gut, yeah, I think he returns. And maybe that's just me rehashing year after year after year of all these rumors, and just being like, but we'll see. I think we'll see, and we'll see within the next probably 8 to 10 days.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Hey, Josh, man, I can't thank you enough for joining us here and talking Florida State, even the Florida coaching search and a possible FSU coaching search. But you guys do go check. Tell everybody where they can check you out on Twitter, Big Three Roll Up, and the website.
Yeah, man, we're the Big Three Roll Up. You can get us on iTunes every Thursday morning at 7 a.m. If you want to follow me at Josh Newberg 247. I'm on Knowles 24/7, the 24/7 Sports Network, and I appreciate you guys having me on. Good luck today.
All right, man. Josh, thanks, man. See ya. Well, he had some good stuff there, and we'll kind of rehash that. Going from what we'll be talking about too, of course, we've talked a little bit about Chip Kelly and how he brought up Willie Taggart would be a coach on the sideline that opposing teams would be afraid of. But before we dive into that, Gators Breakdown is brought to you by Morty, Morty, the newest and smartest way to get a home mortgage. If you ever bought a home, the mortgage process can be some of the most confusing and painful hours of your life. Now, you guys know I recently bought a house myself, and to find a lender that fits the needs for me and my family, and doing all the research myself for rates took entirely way too much time. I really needed to find a way to make the process fast and worry-free. Morty makes it fast and easy. Morty not only simplifies the process, but they help you find the smartest mortgage that's right for you. Just input your information into Morty's secure website, and in less time than it takes to hear this ad, you can shop qualified rates from different lenders. With Morty, you'll get real loan options in minutes without ever being called or sold to by a mortgage broker. And by shopping loans from different lenders, you're able to pick the rate and term that best fits your needs. In addition to that, Morty can automatically generate a pre-approval letter online for you in minutes, which will help you speed up the home buying process and talk confidently to realtors and sellers. Morty wants to save you money. At Morty, there's no commission salespeople, so their experts exist solely to get you the best deal possible. If you ever get stuck or have questions, someone from Morty's team is always ready to assist you over real-time chat or on the phone. So whether you're a first-time home buyer looking to refinance or buying an investment property, head on over to trymorty.com/Gators to get started today. That's TRYMORTY, trymorty.com/Gators. Morty Inc. is a licensed mortgage broker, equal housing lender, www.nmlsconsumeraccess.org, 1429243. So Will, it's been a eventful midweek, midweek going into Thanksgiving with Chip Kelly talk. So we'll get to that in just a second, but to kind of continue from the Florida State game, we'll brush over the game because look, I know it's the last game of the season. It is still football season, but burying the lead if you're not talking about coaching churches right now is that's exactly what you're doing. Is burying the lead. So what are you looking for from Florida against Florida State? And I think one thing I've been going back and forth on Twitter with some people, and they don't necessarily see the improvement in Felipe Franks, but you have, and you and I've talked about it privately a little bit. But what have you seen from Felipe Franks against South Carolina, against UAB, that maybe he can build upon those 2 weeks and put something together against FSU to lead the Gators to a win?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of things. I mean, the first thing is that he's showing much more confidence when he's stepping up and actually throwing the ball when it is his first read. And then he's checking off of his first read and coming to his second or even his third. There's a touchdown pass to DeAndre Goolsby in the game against UAB where Goolsby was clearly his third read. His first read was up at the top of the screen. If you were watching on TV, he had a wide receiver that was his first read, and he came off of it and came to a second. That guy wasn't open, comes to the third. The tight end's open, and he rifles it in there. I mean, Franks is physical talent has never been up for debate. The problem earlier in the year, especially against A&M, was just that he'd see his one read, it was shut down, and he'd take off running and he'd get sacked. So, there has been significant improvement since he was benched, and whether that's because he just at some point said, "To hell with it, I'm gonna let it fly," or I think more likely is things were able to slow down a little bit when he got off the field and started looking at the film without having the pressure to prepare. And then once he got into games where he had prepared, he was ready to go at that point. So there's been significant improvement in his ability to go through leads. He stepped up in the pocket a couple of times against UAB when there was some pressure, and he stepped up. There was one I'm remembering specifically. It was like a 3rd and 8, and he stepped up in the pocket while he was under pressure. He threw it out to, I think it was his third read, who was a wide receiver who was running a little curl, and the receiver dropped it. But it was a perfect pass. And really quality quarterback play. So that wasn't something that we saw against Michigan or anybody else earlier in the year, certainly not against Kentucky. We're seeing it now. It doesn't mean he's a Heisman Trophy candidate.
Thank you. That's the point I'm trying to get at. Just because we said he's improved does not mean he's just a great quarterback. No.
So, I wrote an article today that came out, and it was a preview for the Florida State game. But one of the things I said is, he's progressed from unplayable to essentially like Del Rio and Appleby last year. If you look at the stats, it's kind of where he's at now. So he's serviceable. And last year, the team won 10 games. So, and the last 2 years, they've won 10 games with that sort of quarterback play. So you can do that with an elite defense. The problem is Florida doesn't have an elite defense, and they're getting that kind of quarterback play, and that's just not a real good recipe for success.
I think what we've seen, Will, and where they probably are a little bit better than last year is the running back depth. And we saw that Darius Lemons come in and get the bulk of his carries for the season against UAB. We've seen, as the week, really started with the Georgia game, as the weeks go by, where it doesn't really matter who Florida puts at running back right now. They are looking like they can get the job done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's been the story all year. Is the only place that Florida's been able to get the job done is on the ground. With Malik Davis and P. Ryan, and now Lemons. I mean, they had pretty decent running back depth last year with Scarlett and then P. Ryan coming in on the back end, and they had some of these guys that they didn't necessarily play, but Mark Thompson has showed that he's pretty decent as well. So again, it's that question we've been asking for the last 3 years: is it coaching, is it development, or is it a lack of talent? I think we kind of know the answer. I think the fact that there is a different coach coming in is something we're all looking forward to see what he'll do with this sort of talent. I do take a little bit of exception to something that Josh said, though. Florida State is 97th in the country against FBS teams in running the ball. They've averaged 3.8 yards per rush. So the idea that they're just going to hand the ball to Akers and all of a sudden he's going to be ripping off 15-yard runs, that's not how you beat Florida. The way you beat Florida is you throw the ball to Akers and you make the linebackers cover it. I mean, and that's the thing I think you need to look at. And the question then is can Blackman get the ball to the running backs and to the tight ends against the linebackers in coverage? And, he's right that they'll have to run the ball because you want Florida to have 3 linebackers out in the field. I don't think Florida's going to do it. I think they're going to play the same single high safety look that Randy Shannon doesn't really like, but he's been forced to play. I think they're going to have to play. I think they're going to play that. They're going to walk their safety up, and Florida State's going to have to run them out of it. And hopefully they don't get any linebackers isolated on any running backs.
Yeah. I don't, in picking this game, I'm picking like a score of 23-20 Florida, and I don't really know why I'm picking Florida. Both teams are 4-6, not really anything going for them right now. But I don't know why. Just a gut feeling that this team comes together. I've picked against them plenty of times this year of things being mentally wrong with them, with everything that's going on. That could still be the case right now. But I just kind of see maybe the team rallying last game with this coaching staff more than likely. Maybe try to come together for Duke Dawson, Brendan Powell, and the seniors that are there. But more importantly for this coaching staff that apparently they've cared so much for from what we've been told and how they shared stories on Twitter and all that. But maybe come together and send this coaching staff out and these players, this team that they know as of now, send them out the right way. But, there are things you can look at on the field as well. I do like Florida's run game to continue to do well. And Florida, as long as there's not too many third and long play actions, I think will be in this game. But
only 5 or 6, Dave. Only 5 or 6.
Only 5 or 6. That's progress, probably. But yeah, I like Florida's defensive line being able to really get after Blackman, make him run around, and have to make plays for FSU. And Jimbo Fisher as well, like Josh said. You mentioned they don't have the yards per carry there, but I'm kind of also looking at Florida's inability to be able to stop the run so far late this season. They did rebound against UAB. But against Georgia, against Missouri, against South Carolina, had really struggled against the run. So I think if Florida State does come in and try and concentrate on the run and at least test this Florida defense to see if they can run on them, and if Florida mans up and starts stopping the run, and I don't think it would be as bad as the Georgia game in the big chunk yardage against Missouri and South Carolina in those games. That's what really killed them, was just a big run. So if Florida just can stop those big runs, I do like Florida's chances here.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of reasons to like Florida here, and most of them have to do with Florida State. They don't necessarily have to do with Florida. The first one is, Florida State's coming in and they're trying to get bowl eligible. And if you're a 5-star recruit who's coming to Florida State, how motivated are you really to get into the Belk Bowl or wherever they're going to end up going? I mean, hey, you get to go to Shreveport. Is that really all that motivating? And then the other motivation factor, and as a stats guy, this drives me nuts to try to figure out what team's going to come in motivated. It's why picking bowl games is such a crapshoot. But none of Florida's players have beaten Florida State, and that has to count for something, that people like Brandon Powell aren't going to want to leave school not having beaten them. So you got to imagine Randy Shannon's been playing that card all week, and that he's been pressing that button and trying to keep the team motivated. The other thing is the game being in the swamp is a really big deal. I mean, we talked when Florida played Texas A&M that Kellen Mond was coming in, and that there was this that if you look at true freshman quarterbacks, there's a huge drop off from their home stats to their road and neutral site stats. And the same thing applies to Blackman. He's at a quarterback rating of 146 at home and 108 on the road. He's got 9 touchdown passes to 4 interceptions at home, 3 touchdowns versus 4 interceptions on the road, 53% completion on the road and 61% at home. So, if Road Blackman shows up, then it's going to be like we're looking at the Florida offense in the mirror. I mean, it's going to be a quarterback who can't convert third downs. It's going to be a quarterback who looks shell-shocked when there's any sort of pass rush. And that's going to be a real problem for FSU, because FSU is averaging 3.4 sacks given up per game when they're not at home, and they're averaging 9.8 tackles for loss against their offense. So you figure a team has 10 to 15, or probably has 14 or 15 possessions in a game. That means they've got a play that loses yardage on 2/3 of their drives. I mean, if you put any offense in 2nd and 13, 3rd and 12, they're going to struggle. And so Josh mentioned that the offensive line is a mess. It's really a mess. And so it's not just a matter of DeAndre Francois being out, and if Blackman plays really well, they'll succeed. I don't know that Florida State has the ability on the offensive line to take advantage of the things that Florida conceivably has as weaknesses. And that's why I'm picking Florida. It's because of the things that you look at it with Florida State. Just, the fact that it's on the road, so you're going to get worse play from the quarterback and worse play from the offensive line. Florida State's defense is a little bit better, particularly against the pass, but Florida doesn't really want to run the ball, or doesn't want to pass the ball anyway. They'd love to be able to run the ball. You would think. Now, sometimes the game plans have sort of belied that.
There you go. That's yeah.
But I mean, that was exactly what Josh said, right? I mean, he's like, I don't trust the staff to call the right plays. Whoa, it's like looking in a mirror. So, and there's a reason why both teams are 4-6. So I'm picking Florida 20-14, mainly because it's a home game, and I think they're probably going to be a little bit more motivated. And man, this Florida State's offensive line just not been very good this year.
Yeah, well, so we can't go past this any longer. Twitter hell broke loose on the Florida coaching search. This podcast is recorded on Wednesdays. So on Wednesday evening, the UCLA 24/7 site put out a report that Chip Kelly was going to agree to be the next UCLA coach based on what they were hearing from agents around the country and potential coaches that Chip Kelly would be coaching with. Now, Frank Frangie here in Jacksonville has said he had talked to 2 assistant coaches where he had heard that as well, that those assistant coaches would be going or they would gauge interest in going with Chip Kelly to UCLA. And then I think, this report probably caught wind of that, and I think was using that as their source as well in that article. So lo and behold, about 45 minutes later, the article mysteriously disappeared. It no longer is up. So did they count their chickens before they hatched? Is there some stuff they were not supposed to say? Was it completely wrong? There's a lot of questions out there about what really went on with that article. But look, the fact still remains. It really looks like now UCLA is a legit factor in trying to bring Chip Kelly back to college coaching, and looks to be the biggest threat of getting Chip Kelly away from Florida and to UCLA. There are different reasons. Bill and I talked about it the other night, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it too, of why he may choose UCLA over Florida. But going back and looking at what I just said about the article being posted and then mysteriously taken down, it's kind of a weird situation that threw Gator Nation in a tizzy in the Twitter world.
Yeah, we got to watch out for that, right? When people are trying to be first. I know there's a desire to be first. Thankfully, none of the stuff I write has anything to do with any of that, so I'm never trying to do that. I mean, but we saw that with the suspensions over the summer, where some people published stuff that wasn't accurate, and all of a sudden you've got guys associated with the credit card scandal who had nothing to do with it, and that's just really unfortunate for them. So, I don't know. I mean, I understand why someone would want to go to UCLA. That's a pretty plum job, and living in Los Angeles isn't a bad deal. But I also understand why someone would want the Florida job. And if the same types of articles were popping up about Florida 3, 4, 5 days ago, right? Where, hey, it's a done deal, they just haven't announced it yet. It's a done deal, they haven't announced it yet. So the only thing that's different here is that now there's an article coming out saying UCLA is a done deal. Obviously, the fact that it got pulled down sort of kills its credibility, but I think you're going to see that until there's finally an announcement. And if Kelly does decide to go to UCLA, that's a pretty significant whiff for the Florida administration. But other than that, we're not going to know until there's an announcement, because there's just so much misinformation going around. I'm not sure anybody can make heads or tails of it.
Well, I posed this question to myself today, and I want to get you to finish it and see where you go with it. I think we'll agree the better job is Florida. I don't know if we know Chip Kelly well enough, but the better fit is which team?
Yeah, I think the better fit. I think it sort of depends on what he wants. I think the better fit's probably UCLA when you really think about it. Not just because he was out on the West Coast with Oregon, but because the only team he's going to have to really compete with is USC. I mean, Washington has Chris Peterson, and they're pretty good, but he's going to bring in way better players than Peterson. Helton at USC is not Pete Carroll or even really Lane Kiffin. So, they're going to be decent, but Darnold's going to leave. And then who do they have coming back? And who else is there out in the Pac-12 that you have to be afraid of on a regular basis? I mean, I love David Shaw, but Stanford just isn't bringing in the quality of athlete that UCLA is going to. So if you think about, and then you come and you look at the SEC, and you've got Kirby Smart at Georgia that you'll have to take over. Looks like somebody like maybe Dan Mullen at Tennessee building that program up, and then you got obviously Saban and Malzahn on the other side. Though there are rumors about Malzahn going to Arkansas too, but Auburn's a pretty good team, and Alabama obviously is a juggernaut. So if it's me, and I've already gone 47-6 or 46-7, whatever he did at Oregon. If it's me, I want to go to Oregon, or I want to go to Florida, because I want to take down Saban. I mean, you've done everything in college except for win a national championship if you're Chip Kelly. And really, if you can take down Nick Saban, you're a legend. If you take down Clay Helton, what if you're a decent West Coast coach? So I think a lot of it's going to come down to what does he want his legacy to be, and sort of what's his next step. I think he'll get less vitriol at UCLA. I mean, one of the things I was thinking of while Josh was talking is, you look at 5 years before Jimbo Fisher was officially the head coach at Florida State, they didn't win 10 games once. And he takes over in 2010, and they've only won, and since then in the 8 years they will have finished below 10 wins twice. So 6 of the 8 years, and he's won a national championship, and he's made it to a playoff. And those guys are asking, do we want a different coach? I mean, give me 10 wins a year with a national championship and a playoff appearance for the next 8 years. I'm going to throw a parade for the guys. So, that's the same kind of pressure cooker that you're getting into at Florida, and maybe he just doesnme want that.
That's the thing. We don't know what Chip Kelly wants. And you privately sent an article, and excuse me. You privately sent an article. I think the Washington Post had posted, and that kind of. There's a lot of people out there, even though they were close to Chip Kelly, cannot describe the type of person he really is, besides being to himself and being private. Like, they know him, but they don't really know him. And there were years of his life that are unaccounted for, basically, at times. And the people don't talk family with him. You don't make small talk with him. So there are a lot of people out there who don't really know Chip Kelly. They don't know his mindset. They don't know what he thinks. They don't know what he wants in the coaching world. Is it to go to the SEC and beat Nick Saban and hold hey, look, he hasn't held a trophy yet. He hasn't held a national championship trophy in college. He went to the NFL. It didn't work out there. There's no Super Bowl trophy to point to. So, can he see himself as the ultimate goal to win a national championship? I think we can sit here and say then Florida is the best fit. You got the athletes, and look at the last few decades of what Florida has done and what UCLA has done, and it's not even close. Florida is a program that for the last 30 years or so has been towards the top of the college football world. UCLA is middling. It's a basketball school. It's a college that is looked down upon with pro teams and USC, as you mentioned. So we don't know what Chip Kelly thinks when you start looking at that. But going back to that Washington Post article that you posted, there's a lot of people who really don't know what Chip Kelly would want.
Yeah, and it really screams that he's a giant introvert. And that, I think, is where Los Angeles can maybe play a pretty big role here. Is, you hear all sorts of stories about professional athletes who go and live in Los Angeles in the off season because nobody bothers them. Because there's so many professional athletes and so many actors and so many actresses and so many famous people out there that they can walk around. And they don't get stopped. They don't get stopped for autographs. They don't get told they're a bum. Like, they're just people, right? And we live in Los Angeles. Everybody is in a town of famous people, and so for an introvert, that might actually be. You wouldn't think that a large city just right off the bat would fit for an introvert, but Los Angeles may actually be a perfect fit. And if you think about the comments from Dan Mullen's wife talking about having to drive to Orlando to get groceries, and you start to see the dichotomy there between the two places, it doesn't mean I don't love Gainesville. It just means a very different place than Los Angeles. The other thing is that, again, it sort of depends on what he wants. If you take a program, like, I think you can compete for national championships at UCLA.
Oh, I can do. Yeah.
And particularly if you've got Casey Wasserman throwing in money from like Phil Knight was at Oregon. I mean, he's gonna have all the recruiting advantages that he didn't have at Oregon. But if he can get somebody who's throwing money into the program like he had with Phil Knight at Oregon, I mean, that's a program that you're going to be able to build. It's probably an easier path to a national title through the Pac-12, and so. Certainly you don't have to go through Saban until you meet him in the last game. And so, I think in that capacity, it's, if you're sitting there thinking about legacy and flags fly forever and all that sort of stuff, I mean, it's like LeBron staying in the East. I mean, you just stay in the East so you can go to the finals 7 straight years, as opposed to having to dogfight your way through it. And, maybe you get there 2 or 3 times instead of every year. So, like I said, it's going to come down to what Kelly's preferences are. But the fact that Florida has not made it a obvious choice is an issue.
Speaking of that, and Darren Heitner has been a name that's been pretty popular out there on Twitter. And speaking, going back to the Jim McElwain firing, him having it days out there before it actually happened, he tweeted his sources: Chip verbally agreed to Florida before the South Carolina game, and Florida has been vetting dozens of assistant candidates. I've heard that part about it. The vetting dozens of assistant candidates for Chip Kelly. That there would the list of coaches that he would want to bring, and Florida has been vetting those coaches as well. He goes on to say Chip signed an agreement with Florida this past Sunday. Now that has been refuted by some people. Some people also actually believe that. But the agreement includes window for Chip to back out of deal. Hence the UCLA talks. I'm sorry, the University of Florida is not giving an agreement with a window to back out. There's absolutely, I don't believe that part of it. I don't believe the University of Florida goes up there and gets a deal up there with a back out window. Now, maybe it happened, but if you're asking my opinion, and if that's a viable option for the University of Florida, I don't buy it. And I still also have a hard time buying that the people that went up there, the important people, the AD, the president, the senior associate athletic director who handles media relations, the people who write contracts up, I'm sorry, I don't think they went up there to, and from what I've heard, answer Chip Kelly's questions. And that's all they went up there for. Sorry, that can be done with a phone call. That can be done on Skype. That can be done with what we're doing here on Google Hangouts. I don't believe that. I think they went up there to get a deal done. And there is back and forth on what actually happened.
I mean, whether he signed or not, I'm not sure necessarily matters. If there was a window, it's 6 of one, half a dozen the other. If you give him a window, essentially what you're doing is just, I guess, putting a deadline on the decision, as opposed, if he doesn't have a window, then he can just it's like signing day, right? The guy doesn't actually have to sign on signing day. They can let it linger. Very few signees usually do, but they do have the ability to do that. I think it's maybe the same thing with Kelly. You put that in there and then it sets down a deadline. At the end of the day, I'm not sure that you necessarily want the guy as your coach if he's not sure he wants to be here. And I think Kelly's a fantastic coach. I think he's a home run hire if Florida brings him in and he really wants to be here. But if he's truly oscillating as much as the reports are saying that he is, then hey, I mean, there are other people who can do 95% from a track record perspective, and possibly might even be better fits because they don't have the recruiting baggage that he has with some of the recruiting violations. So, I mean, Chip Kelly's a really good coach, but he hasn't won a national championship, and he certainly has rubbed some people the wrong way. And so, I don't think a program with the stature of Florida should really be sitting there waiting unless they just think he's the absolute perfect fit. But again, I don't know whether it matters whether he signed or not. It's just a matter of setting a deadline. You can do that with or without the signature, really.
Well, that's kind of what I was saying. Even if he did sign an agreement, and I've seen this I brought up with people know on Twitter. Tally, I think Tally Juice is his Twitter moniker. If you go back and look at Billy Donovan and what he went through with the Orlando Magic, and that contract was signed, and there was a press conference and everything, and then he's not the Orlando Magic head coach. Yeah. And it pretty much speaks to what you said. If you don't want to be there, then you don't want to be there. And if the administration, the higher ups know that, then you sit there and tell them you don't want to be there. You know what? Contracts, yes, contracts are contracts, but you tell them that, you're probably going to work something out.
Yeah, the other thing is when someone else comes in and offers you a job, you all of a sudden have leverage.
Yeah.
And obviously these reports that he conceivably could be considering UCLA is something that someone could consider as leverage. And there were reports last week or the week before that he was willing to take less money, to free up money for his assistants. Well, maybe now that he's got leverage, he doesn't want to take less money. And, Florida might be able to get this done just by bumping the deal. And then the question is, does Florida think that it's worth bumping the deal for the coach? And, I think you and I probably both think it is, just because we want an elite coach with a proven track record, which has sort of been what I've been writing for almost a month now is go get an elite coach, open up your purse strings, because even the guys with unproven records are going to be really expensive, especially now that some of these other coaches are getting fired as well, and all these spots are opening up. But, heck, I was just looking at Jimbo Fisher's record. Bring him on. Let's have him come in. He'll I'll take 10 wins.
Yeah, I've seen people joke about that too. Hey, if Jimbo doesn't want to be at FSU, maybe you slide over to Florida. So,
oh God, Twitter would explode.
What a storyline that would be.
Twitter would explode.
Here it is. Let Twitter explode. Let that happen. Let Gus Malzahn go to Arkansas, and then let Lane Kiffin go to Auburn. SEC Twitter would explode. It would be SEC Network would probably have the highest ratings of the programs of the network's history if something like that happened.
It is funny because I'm not high on Kiffin, or at least as high as some other people are, but he's probably the only guy you can bring in if this whole Kelly thing falls through. I mean, either that or you try to pretend it's a smokescreen, you bring in Frost, but there's been way too much noise here for this to have been a smokescreen.
Thank you. I completely agree. I've seen the word smokescreen thrown around a lot. There's way too much now, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, I look at it and say the only way you can act this down is bringing in Kiffin and letting him spur it up and just make fun of everybody and accuse people of recruiting violations and all sorts of stuff, and just sort of embrace his abrasiveness and let it fly. I think that's maybe the only thing that sort of puts a salve on the wound for Florida, is to have someone come in and start trash talking right away.
I want to go back to something, Will, and I've heard this thrown around too, of there may be thoughts of the administration letting whoever the new coach would be, and in this case Chip Kelly, keep some of the current staff, try and keep them at Florida. I think if you're hiring a new coach and you've seen what has happened in the Jim McElwain area with this coaching staff, now I don't know if there's really a mandate of, hey, you keep Randy Shannon, hey, you keep Jawan Sider, hey, you keep Brad Davis, hey, you keep Corey Bell. But I would like to think that wouldn't be holding up any potential hiring of a new coach.
I mean, you can do that for a coach who has no options. It's really hard to do that when a coach has 4 or 5 people. I mean, if Kelly wanted to be the coach at Tennessee, he'd be the coach at Tennessee.
Yeah.
It sounds like if Kelly wants to be the coach at UCLA, he's going to be the coach at UCLA. I mean, he's got options. You can't tell him what to do.
Yeah.
Like, unless he's just saying, look, whoever gives me the most amount of money, that's where I'm going to go, and I don't care what kind of stipulations you put on it. Unless he says that, you have to give him some of those concessions for the things that he wants. And as little as we know about Kelly, we do know that he is extraordinarily hands-on. And that was one of the biggest complaints about him with the Eagles, is that he wanted control of personnel. And then when he got control of personnel, it became a problem because he wasn't a very good general manager. But he wanted that control. And so I don't see any scenario where he's going to come here and say, oh yeah, tell me how to run my program. I mean, and that's not good for the assistant coach that they keep.
Exactly.
I mean, because then he's the black sheep and doesn't know what's going on, and there's gossip and all sorts of other stuff. And God, you want to talk about a culture killer right away? Get a coach that the head coach doesn't want hanging around with key recruits and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's not going to be too long till that guy leaves, goes someplace where he is wanted, and takes all his recruits with him. So, yeah, I think it's stupid to tell a head coach who he should hire as assistants, because I think one of the biggest things that you need for a coaching staff to be cohesive is trust. And so you want a coaching staff that everybody trusts each other, and that way they're all heading in the same direction. And I don't think you're going to get that unless the new head coach who comes in knows Randy Shannon. Well, then it makes some sense. He knows him, he trusts him, he keeps him on. Or he knows Jawan Sider. So, he knows him, he trusts him, he keeps him on. But just to say, hey, you've never met this guy, and by the way, you have to have him as your running back coach, or you have to keep, Nord on special teams. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, and I get if you're a new head coach, I get the administration, especially if you're Chip Kelly. And he doesn't have experience in the SEC. His recruiting ties are not in the SEC. Now, I can see, hey, we know this guy knows the state of Florida very well. It might be beneficial if you try and keep him. But that's really all it should be. It should be maybe you should take a look at this guy and go from there. And this is what he did with, if you're talking about Jawan Sider, hey, look, this is what he did last year in recruiting in his first year here. And look, here's the production of the running backs that we got this year. You combine everything that you can sales pitch, but you don't – yeah, I don't get me wrong. I don't think Scott Strickland will do this. I don't think he would give a coach an ultimatum to make this hire, especially if it's Chip Kelly. As you said, options, a guy who has a proven track record that has done it his way. He probably walked into a great situation at Oregon. He was the offensive coordinator there for years under Bellotti, so he knew a lot of the guys that were currently on the staff when he got elevated to head coach. So that worked really in his advantage. So it would be interesting to see how he would build a staff at Florida by really not having to build one at Oregon, and he did. But he did have experience of doing it in the NFL. So I would like to see how, if he is at Florida or UCLA for that matter. But like I said, there are ties in the West Coast. He has no ties in the East Coast. I'd like to see how he would tie that as far as coaching goes, besides his New Hampshire days. But that doesn't really translate to Florida too much. And I'm not trying to make this he's an East Coast guy or a West Coast guy. I think you could. He's a national guy. So I'll put it that way. But it would be interesting to see how he would look at it if it would be beneficial to keep some of the current guys on his staff.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the key that everybody loved about Kelly when he was at Oregon, one of the reasons Philadelphia brought him in to coach the Eagles, is that he's creative, that he's an innovator, and so he tried in the NFL to innovate, and I think in many cases when he got the teams to buy in, they actually played pretty well. Certainly, we talked about Nick Foles succeeding, and the only time he succeeded was under Kelly. But he's creative and he's innovative. Those are the things you want. So within that capacity, you figure he's open to new ideas, which means that, hey, you should take a look at this guy. Yeah, that's fine. But to tell him, hey, you have to take this guy, nah, that's not going to work. And the other thing is we are going on blind faith that Strickland knows what he's doing. Mm-hmm. But he's putting down a interesting track record here with all of the Twitter trolling of the fans and all that sort of stuff. If he doesn't get his guy, it's not going to look good. And he didn't hire the head coach when he was at Mississippi State, and he had a pretty awful PR nightmare with the Jeffrey Simmons thing that went on at Mississippi State as well. So I'm looking at that saying, I don't know whether he's not the right guy for the job, but there's no track record of, he always gets the guy he wants. He always does a good job. He's good at finding diamonds in the rough. There just isn't one. And so who knows?
Hey, and also this is his first football hire. He didn't hire Dan Mullen at Mississippi State.
Yeah.
So you hired an athletic director who has not made a head coaching choice for a football team.
Yeah, well, and so I don't know what kind of rules he's putting down. I certainly hope he's just saying, "Hey, we think that you should build the program the way you want to build it, because if it's an image of you, look at what you did at the previous place where it was an image of you, and that's what we want here. We want to go 46-7 over the next 4 years. What can you do to make that happen? And just defer to the coach and it is interesting, all the leaks and all the information and things like that. I don't remember this much when McElwain was being pursued.
Yeah.
And so, is that just because Foley kept his cards much closer to his chest? Is it because there was more trust in the athletic office, so people weren't necessarily leaking out bits and pieces of the story? Is it because people have been leaking stuff on the coach's side of the ledger, whether that be Frost or Kelly or Mullen or whoever? I don't know, but there's just been so much information out there. And part of the job of the athletic director, quite honestly, is to keep that to a minimum so that he can go through his progressions. And if he doesn't get the first guy he wants, that nobody knows that. Or at least they don't know that he was like the 1A choice, the 1B choice, and the 1C choice. And now we've dropped down to like 4th or 5th in the rung before we even start searching. And I know there was quite a bias against Ron Zook when he was brought in, because there was a pretty big push to get Stoops.
Mm-hmm.
And when Stoops didn't take the job, obviously then Zook was sort of seen as a secondary choice. And I think that's true. He was.
Panic move.
Yeah. And you're going to end up with the same thing here, right? Is unless they if Kelly doesn't come and they don't take a big step back and figure out how to get another home run in, it's going to look bad. That's just the long and short of it. It's going to look bad.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into more about that, of course, when the decision is made. But you're right. As it looks now, they don't get Kelly. The optics do not look good, especially after knowing they took a flight up there with the staff that they took up there and couldn't get the job done. So I'll leave everybody with this and then kind of get your opinion too. Former Oregon coach Mike Bellotti on ESPN today was asked about Chip Kelly's decision. This was a quote from him. If he has a choice between UCLA and Florida, I think he would take Florida. They're both good jobs, but UCLA has fired every coach since Terry Donahue. So that ends his quote there. I will admit, we did a podcast Monday where I felt confident in saying Chip Kelly would be the next coach at Florida. I still feel he will be, but I will admit, with all the UCLA smoke out there, a little more doubt is creeping into my mind. But I still think, when it's all said and done, and this is still opinion, gathering from sources that I trust who still think Chip Kelly will be a Gator, I'll lean that way too, because I trust their insight and still kind of reading along with what's going on. But I won't lie and say all the talk around UCLA is not worrying just a bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. One is that Chip Kelly, everything you read about him is that he's not afraid of what other people think, and he's not afraid of failing. And so he's not going to be afraid of a program that's fired coaches or hasn't fired coaches or has a bunch of people who have opinions or stuff like that. It's going to be, where does he feel comfortable? Where does he feel like he trusts the administration the most? Who's paying him the most amount of money? Who lets him bring in the assistants he wants? Like, those are the things that are going to make the decision. I don't think he's afraid of failing, and so I don't think that really is going to factor into the UCLA decision much at all. I don't think you get to that level being afraid of doing anything. I think you get to that level by doing things that are different than what your contemporaries do, because that's how you win. And that's one of the complaints that we've had about the offensive coordinator at Florida this year, is that he hasn't made any adjustments as all of his contemporaries have changed, and that offense has just been left behind. So I lean towards Florida because Florida was in on it first. The only thing I think that sinks it is if they don't offer him enough money, or if they don't offer him the freedom, or if they, basically they're going to have to write him a blank check and say, what do you want? And that's how it should be, because he's in high demand in a sport where there are limited amounts of these high-level guys. And unless they want to go after somebody else who's got this kind of track record, it's going to be very difficult for them to walk away at this point.
Yeah, and there are also reports out there that Florida has met the demands from Chip Kelly, and probably why part of the interest is there. So I would tend to believe that. I would tend to believe if Chip Kelly is asking for something, I do think Scott Strickland and the administration would give it to him. And that's part of the reason people think that the conglomerate that went up there was going up there, was so those questions can be answered. by Chip Kelly, but I still think that there was more to it than that with who went up there. So, Will, you kind of mentioned it earlier and what you're working on for SEC Country, but you had you got your FSU preview posted soon, and I'm sure whenever it's announced, you'll also be releasing your thoughts on the head coach. So, what you got going on in SEC Country?
Yeah. So there was a preview of the Florida State game that went up today. Went over some of the stuff we talked about, but there's some new stuff in there as well. But just sort of looking at how the offenses and defenses compare and what you could sort of expect for the game. There will obviously be a review article on Sunday morning that comes out after the Florida State game, sort of probably reviewing that game, but then also looking at the season. And then like you said, whenever there's an announcement on the coaching decision, I'll have something out there taking a statistical look at the guy who is Florida's new head coach. Obviously, I hope it's Kelly because I've actually already written that one. But
and I've got some research too, dang it, that I want to use. So come on.
But Bill keeps posting stats on Twitter that I've got in the article, so I got to keep switching it because yeah. But nah, so yeah, when there's a coaching hire, certainly I'll be on top of it, sort of providing the same type of stuff I always do, and appreciate all the feedback and everybody's comments.
Absolutely. Anything else, Will, before we sign off on this one?
Nah, man, just appreciate you having me on. And you know what? It's the last game of the season. It's against Florida State. Let's have a good time and watch the game. And hell, I picked 20-14, but God, can we just get like a 50-7 or something? That'd be so nice.
Just something. End the season on a great note. Hopefully, Chip Kelly's announced the next day, and the Gator Nation's elated for a few days, for a few months, and then hopefully a few years to come. So, also thanks to Josh Newberg from Knowles 24/7 and the Big 3 Roll Up for joining us. Will Miles, you can find Will on Twitter at Will Miles SEC. I'm your host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Happy Thanksgiving out there to everyone. Enjoy time with your family. And as Will said, enjoy the FSU game. Hopefully the game comes out on the winning end for the Gators. So for Bill, who's joined us, and happy Thanksgiving to his family as well. All you out there for listening to Gators Breakdown, I can't thank you enough for checking us out, and we're thankful for all the listeners out there who keep checking us out. All the old listeners, all the new listeners, thanks very much for checking out Gators Breakdown.